On a dusty and forgotten plain, on Castor of the Corel system, sits a small ceremonial plaque that commemorates where, in 2670, Audrey Timmerman launched her experimental ship, the Poby, before a small crowd of fellow pilots, investors, and aerospace enthusiasts. Though the test flight failed when a power surge fried several of the Poby's Sheehan-inspired maneuverable thrusters, the small event evolved over the centuries into the ultimate celebration of ships and the tech that made interstellar flight possible, the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo, shortly known as the IAE. Yet, the event's rich centuries-long history is an incredible journey itself, one that not only chronicles advancements in space travel, but also reflects the social and political forces shaping the empire. Historian Ariel Root famously argued that the IAE is so much more than a ship's showcase. It's one of the best historical gauges for the state of the empire itself. In celebration of the 2952 IAE, let's look at some of the distinct eras in IAE history and the important and memorable moments that shape them. Let's start with Kitbash from 2670 to 2714 era. Failed flight aside, Timmerman considered the first event a success and focused on making each subsequent one bigger and better. Standing among the first in the crowd was Stephen Dillard, whose New Junction Ship Emporium became the event's first sponsor in 2675. To advertise the event and his dealership, Dillard acquired a version of every spacecraft made that year and exhibited them across a massive Castor plane in a way that was visually arresting on the ground and spelled IAE from above. Vids of the event's saturated spectrum and popularized the use of IAE to refer to the event. In 2683, when RSI signed on as an official sponsor, Timmerman and her dedicated team found that they had enough funding and clout to hold the event at the Augustan Expedition Hall on Low. When local officials denied permits for a flyover of homemade spacecraft citing safety violations, Timmerman moved the experimental flight show back to Castor and used RSI ships to ferry observers to and from it. This split event continued for years until a tragic experimental ship crash in 2701 killed both pilot and 15 observers. Legal repercussions and civil lawsuits from the accident nearly destroyed the event, so they decided to change their approach. Amateur pilots handling homemade builds were officially out, and stunt flying from the Navy's elite Reckless 999 test squadron was in. RSI stuck by the IAE and remained the primary sponsor of the event for years, using its industrial clout to attract more sponsors and market the event as the most prestigious and important ship show in the verse. 2712 saw RSI using the IAE to push its latest ship, the Constellation. The expo gathered massive interest in the ship and sales skyrocketed, which couldn't have come at a better time for the RSI, with the loss of several military contracts to Aegis Dynamics. The Connie's commercial success proved that the event could be boon to the company's bottom line. Yet industry observers weren't the only ones to recognize the IAE's growing influence. This leads in to the IAE's Age of Aegis, from 2715 to 2791. Following the 2712 Expo, the Mezzer regime looked to use the IAE's popularity to push its agenda and began proposing ideas to its leadership, who placated them on smaller issues but ignored the majority of their requests. Years later, in 2704, Timmerman had created a non-profit organization to oversee the IAE and ensure profits would go to charities once she was gone. She also hoped to create a board of directors who would diffuse undue political and corporate influence. It helped until 2715, when Low's local government refused to permit the expo over fabricated safety concerns. When Timmerman and the IAE board met with local officials to discuss the issues, a Measure regime mediator also joined and made it abundantly clear what changes were expected for the event to be permitted. Timmerman refused to comply and officially retired from running the event instead of facing the promised repercussions to both herself and the expo. For the next few decades, the IAE board was stocked with Measure loyalists, who slowly bent the event to the regime's will. The expo became more exclusive, with most show floor space reserved for ship and component companies that were in good standing with the regime. It was not unusual for smaller or out-of-favor manufacturers to have to pay significant bribes to board members before they would be allowed to have space. In 2725, the IAE began to make guests register for the event by filling out lengthy forms that included a loyalty oath to the empire that many activists and critics refused to sign. Though entry remained free, a ticketing system allowed event organizers to pick who could attend the event and the entire expo in general, and when, which drove interest in attending the event into a fever pitch among the populace. Aegis Dynamics and its military ships dominated this era of the IAE. The regime's favorite manufacturer became so prominent that some began to call the show the Intergalactic Aegis Expo. Memorable events of this era include 2736, when controversy erupted over the use of dogfight footage from a Vandul front in a patriotic vid that looped at the expo. The 2754 event became famous for doubling down on this exclusivity factor. It included a special show floor that only select guests could access after a strict security check. Inside a top-secret military ship, hidden underneath a giant tarp that only divulged its unique silhouette. Years later, that ship was declassified and revealed to be the Aegis Vanguard. The expo's nationalistic bend remained until the fall of the regime in 2792. The resulting chaos of the uprising saw all IAE directors either get arrested or flee. Many wondered if, for the first time in the event's history, IAE would be canceled. Thankfully, a coalition of ship and component manufacturers stepped in to fund the event and work with local low officials to make it happen. This partnership saved the expo and set in motion its next phase. And this next phase, of course, was the corporate expansion of 2792 through 2915. The coalition that took over after the Messers were ousted decided to fill the IAE's vacant board of directors by splitting the seats between local low officials and representatives from prominent ship manufacturers. The ensuing decade saw a struggle of power that was eventually won by corporate interest who wanted the event to expand in more commercial directions. In 2847, the IAE left low to move between locations across the empire. While the event brought huge profits to any system it entered, it also created large logistical headaches to its host. This era culminated in several systems hosting the event in 2870 to celebrate the IAE's 200th anniversary. Although the event was more popular than ever, critics claimed that the corporations controlling the IAE were favoring profits over innovation and neglecting experimental inventors and hobbyists during this era. Defenders of the IAE refuted the criticism by saying that Asperia, run by experimenting hobbyists, was launched into the stratosphere in 2877's event when Victor Hurston flew a refurbished Vandul glaive. Other historians claim that the biggest problem of this era, besides the overtly sanitized corporate environment, would be the local governments hosting the event. This sentiment culminated at the 2913 IAE and Asura Furon, when local organizers failed to build enough hangars and make necessary infrastructure improvements to accommodate the power standards specified in the IAE's contract. This disastrous event showed the IAE Board of Directors the benefits of having a permanent home for the expo, which leads into the current phase of the IAE, New Frontiers, 2916 to present. On the heels of the disastrous expo in Ferron, Governor Hunzan Tuzar of Severus Kiel System approached the IAE Board of Directors and convinced them to make Aegis City the event's new permanent home. The former military system had plenty of hangars, solid infrastructure, and a desperate need for a new identity and economic engine. Aegis City hosted its first expo in 2916, and it has been its home ever since. Having a new permanent location has not been without issues. In 2934, the Advocacy released a report detailing an alarming increase in outlaw activity targeting civilian and corporate transports going to and from the IAE. Meanwhile, IAE-related traffic in the Kiel system has gotten so bad that MISC famously had half-empty show floor for part of the 2941 Expo due to issues getting their transports into the system. This led to the creation of an express lane for IAE-related ships that grants preferential access to the jump gates into Kiel, a system that has been exploited enough to create backups in the express lane that has only further increased the wait times for others. To alleviate this issue, in 2948, the IAE began hosting smaller satellite expos in other systems, so people could attend the event without worsening the situation in Kiel. While some have decried the satellite expos, IAE's historians note it harkens back to the earlier event's split between Low and Castor. Though the modern IAE looks vastly different from first events, the core spirit of camaraderie and enthusiasm over ships remains the same. The IAE provides a place to celebrate the evolution of ships and the tech that makes them possible, while also embodying the current state of the Empire, making IAE's history a fascinating microcosm of UE history. That was Portfolio, Eras of IAE History. Originally was in Jump Point 9.11 and was put up on Spectrum Lore Dispatch November 9th, 2022. Whew, God, that was a short one but a hard one. A lot of very specific names, a lot of very specific places that we don't know yet, and systems and places. And culminating, I don't know, I think I did 6 takes of cultivating. So I had some fun with this one, if that's what you want to call it. But yeah, it was a really good one. I really think it's really cool that the Messers is brought into this, the history of the event, starting from a small, seed-like event with a very small crowd, all the way through an empire that rose and fell, to the corporate takeover, so to speak, of the event. And then finally, it just goes back to its split-up event anyway. Really cool stuff. A little bit of a good amount of lore about Kiel there. So a system that I'm looking forward to. If you played Eve, it reminds me of the Amarian Empire a little bit. Some of the hints I've heard about Kiel, both here and other places, kind of reminds me of that. More geared directly towards, military and utilitarianism. So it's kind of cool. It's good. It's always nice to see different flavors, and that's one of the things that excites me about new systems. I think people are getting a big wake-up call when Pyro shows up, and it's just a pirate wasteland that has a lot of profits to be had and a lot of fighting to be had and good PvP. But other systems excite me more, to be honest. I think that Pyro has its place, but, I want to see Nyx, I want to see these other places, and I want to see built-up systems like Kiel. I mean, I can't imagine what IAE is going to look like in a few years when we finally get these other systems rolled out and we see the main event for the IAE. As a reminder, in-game, the IAE is split amongst days where each manufacturer or a group of small manufacturers has time on the show floor. And that's literally so your computer doesn't crash. So stepping away from the lore and RP for a moment, it has to be that way. So when you take that elevator from the lobby, it takes you a good distance away, and then it puts you into a place that has all these ships. Those are physical ships. You can walk up to them, rent them for $0. Usually there's a rental kiosk at the end of the event, so you can rent them again for free. and really enjoy them. So that's a reminder, if you're new to this game and you're thinking of picking something up, come in for the free fly that always happens at these type of big events. Come play with your friends, rent some free ships, get an idea of what you're looking for before you spend a dime, before you pick up a game pack with someone one of these ships. But yeah, yeah. So in the future, I'd love to see a full-scale IAE that is truly big, as in there is different show floor areas and all the ships are available. So because we don't have these technical limitations we currently have in the system, there would be a show floor for Aegis. There would be a show floor for Drake. There would be a show floor for the alien ships in the Aerisperia replicas and such that would literally be all together. So you wouldn't have to wait 3 real world days just to get to something, or 2 days. And that would be an exciting time for me. Getting to see everybody, shooting Nerf darts at a few folks, having a good time, and talking ships, checking things out. I did like that the recent IAEs have more modules, and you can see in this story from last year, I did adapt the IAE 2952, as did the artist of this, which is all CIG's work, by the way. This was a CIG lore post, and the CIG art that'll be on your screen in a moment, well, is on your screen now. That's just 2952. But the original lore post here in the com link actually says in celebration of the 2951 IAE. So really that could have been edited by CIG. I have not been bashful about telling everybody. I do change the verbiage in these when I start making a little bit of a script to kind of help me along and make it readable, make it pleasant to listen to, make it a story. I never try my absolute best to never change a name, to never change a planet they're on, a type of ship, that kind of thing. Like an actual thing that matters, the year. But in this example, this is one of the I think the only time I can think of that I willfully changed something in the original story from 2951 to 2952, because it has no bearing on the history. It literally is just in preparation for the 2951 IAE. Let's look at some of the distinct errors in IAE history. It's just the intro. And I changed that to 2952 so it felt more relevant and lively for this year. And the funny part is the art they chose for the comm link also had 2952 on it as well. So that gave me the confidence to really just kind of, oh, that's what thanks for the clue, CIG. You're trying to do the same thing I am. You're trying to breathe some life into this and make it seem like it's not stale, and which it isn't. I mean, it's evergreen because it's old. It's the history of IAE, something that's very pleasant and really interesting to, I think, to a lot of people, both new and returning players and diehards. But the yeah, small little decisions I make on these, I'm trying to offer a little bit of that in these overtimes for people that like to dig deep. And if you are considering doing your own videos, I'm always available for collabs. Sorry, I'm getting tongue twisted. Voiceover work does that to me very quickly. All right, that's going to do it for me on this kind of like free form overtime here. And I wish you all the best. I hope to see you all at IAE. Don't forget it's on the PTU. Please take part in the test if you can. Enjoy yourself. Go to the lobbies. Enjoy a few crashes. Submit some crash reports. Make this the best damn IAE we're ever going to have. And until next year when we have an even better one, I bet. Fly safe.